Welcome, everybody, to the Inclusive Insights podcast, the podcast where we explore the power of inclusivity, leadership, and the stories of remarkable individuals who make a difference. I'm your host, Neetu Razdan, and today we have a very special episode for you. Our topic today is playing the long game, the importance of investing in relationships. We are honored to have with us a seasoned leader whose career and experiences exemplify the value of building and nurturing relationships over time. Please join me in welcoming Sharda Cherwoo. Sharda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Neetu. So wonderful to be here and nice to see you after a while. It's been a while.
Same here, Sharda. Awesome. So, just to kick off and for our audience to kind of understand and know you more, can you share a bit about your background, your journey, and how did you get to where you are today?
Uh, so I'm an immigrant to the United States. Came here as a young married woman in 1977. So this was a long time ago. And right out of high school in India and went to school here. And right after graduating, I have an accounting degree. Started at Winnie at the time, Ernst Young, and stayed there for throughout over 37 years.
Wow.
That was chapter 1.0 of my career. And now I'm in chapter 2.0 of my career, which is serving on corporate boards and not-for-profit boards and mentoring, etc. So it's been in a journey right from India to here, and feel blessed to be where I am.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
Any memories from your childhood, or do you see a significant difference between you growing up in India as a child up to high school and then moving to United States? How was the transition?
I think I've transformed completely. I was an introvert. I still am, but uh, I think I've changed a lot. I get out there, grew up in a very conservative environment, where, studies was everything. And you went to school, you did a good job in school and just went home. And it was, we're originally from Kashmir, like you are, right? And so our summer holidays and I used to live in Calcutta. Our Puja holidays was about going to Srinagar, being at our grandmother's place, seeing all the aunts and uncles. So it was a whole different environment. It was a lot about family and friends and being around them, and that was my life till I was 17, and then came here, and that was completely. I mean, and those were the days before the internet, before anything. You didn't even have Excel. You didn't have emails. You didn't have anything. You didn't have cell phones when it did not exist. You had those landlines with cords. And if you ever had to call India, it used to cost, I think, about $9 a minute or something, right? So you barely
Hmm.
ever called as a, a sort of, not having that many resources, you couldn't really afford too many phone calls. So it was a whole different world. And the one thing I do remember is I landed at JFK. I was married. So Satish, my husband, came to pick me up from the airport in his brand new Oldsmobile Omega, a car that he just bought. And it was January 1977, snowing heavily, right? Cold, right? I had this coat, and growing up in Calcutta, you never needed a wool coat for anything, right?
Uh-huh.
So I had this tailored coat, which was wool and everything else, but it was not adequate for the real winters here. So it was, very cold actually. So, you look at those days and say, wow, you've come a long way, and it's you learn a lot. But I really think I think one of the things that, as I look back and you start connecting the dots going back, the discipline and the focus of the system and the educational system that I grew up in India with, in high school, etc. combined with the openness and the innovation and the kinds of things you start seeing. I went to a liberal arts college, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it was not only accounting was a piece of it, but there was philosophy, there was religion, there was psychology, and you basically studied everything over the 4 years. And that really broadened your horizons. And so coming to and going to school here, undergrad, just opened my eyes to a very different world. And I felt like this combination of having spent my earlier years in India and then going to college here, going to school here, really, uh, it was probably very powerful. I think I look back and say it sort of made me, all the stuff that was missing probably just added to where I was. So I look at this and say, and I did transform over time. I would barely ever speak to anybody. I would barely ever be like in the corner everywhere. But it's been a different, I've gotten a lot bolder than I ever was.
Nice. That's great to hear. And that kind of reminds me of me when I
Yeah,
came. It was
yeah,
actually January when I
yeah,
landed at
yeah, yeah.
JFK,
Is
and
that
it
right?
was like
Yeah. Cold.
crazy winter, and I could
Yes.
feel like needles on my face
Yeah,
because of
yeah,
that, the wind chill
yeah.
and all. But yeah, this is some great stories. So because the topic is nurturing relationships. So,
Right,
how was it like leaving all the relationships you had until you were 17 and then
right.
coming here and forming new relations, whether it was professional, whether it was friends, whether it was like, getting married
Yeah.
and coming here? How was
Yeah,
that?
yeah. You know what? You way underestimate. You're basically transplanting. Think about it. It's almost like you take a tree that's grown up and started building nice roots in one place, and then you take that, fairly large
Mm-hmm.
tree and then put them in a different soil, different place, different environment, different everything. Everything was different. Everything was different.
Mm-hmm.
And those days when you didn't have anything, there was no ability to sort of exchange data or even know. All you could do is read some books, and I wasn't very informed at all, right? Um, it was You literally have to figure out how you create, how you take your existing roots and really start getting into the soil and adapting and not be sort of not have sort of root atrophy or whatever else, right? And that takes a lot of doing. That is
Mm.
not, you look back and say, it sort of happened, etc. But it takes a lot of resilience. It takes a lot of learning. I'll tell you, my first job, um, before actually I went to college, and before I started college, I didn't drive. So my first job was at a grocery store, and that I could walk to from our apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And that because that was is literally the only thing I could do. And so I started this store, and I wasn't even familiar with the currency, right? So I hadn't seen
Mm-hmm.
nickels and dimes and everything else, and I was thinking, well, why is a nickel that's 5 cents twice the size of a dime that's 10 cents, right?
Understand.
It's sort of I'm like nothing. I know nothing. And like so I'm in this grocery store, they couldn't even really trust me on the cash register, right? So the best job I could do, and which was actually pretty interesting, is in the aisles, right? Organizing the shelves, and there'd be customers that walk by and ask me questions, and I'm like, literally, they must have thought this girl's like totally dumb. Right, where's the bounty, or where's the paper towel, where's the? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? I'm just like, so it's actually fascinating how much I had to learn, because I had no idea of the product. I had no idea, what any brand was, zero, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's not like this was today where at least you see these brands everywhere and things are there. But then I used to take these, they used to have these sale flyers, right?
Yeah.
Grocery stores used to have these one pagers that they needed. So I'd be like studying them and like, oh, this is interesting. That's what that looks like. That's a brand, and that's the cost. And like, so I started. So there was a lot of paper. There was like nothing electronic. Um, so that's how I ended up learning and getting. And then when I finally got promoted on and could do the cash register, and you had to sort of exchange money, and I was so good at math, so changing money was not a problem. You just had to get used to the currency. You started. You started kind of understanding the people, right? You started
Mm-hmm.
understanding you started interacting with people. Now it's interesting. I spoke English, which was good, but the accent was different, and the accent I had a hard time understanding accent of what this person was saying. So it took a while. So the adaptability. So I think what it did, which it probably does for all immigrants, this is not new,
Mm-hmm.
right? It
Yeah.
forces you to adapt, to be listening a lot more, because you don't understand stuff as fast as other people do, having grown up here, and think about it. So there's a lot more intensity in that interaction, because you have a lot more. It's like you're a 2-year-old. I might have been 17, 18, but I was like a 2-year-old kid in terms of my knowledge of this place, right?
Yeah.
So catching up on those 15, 17 years of knowledge was a big thing. So I'm gonna, yeah. So anyway, so that was early, and then I started, went to school, um, and we chose to live in Bridgeport, Connecticut, because that was the only place in Connecticut where I could take a bus to school. I didn't drive. I was remotely scared of driving. And we only had one car, and Satish, my husband, took that to work. So going to school, and 4 years there, did pretty well. Academically, you're pretty, it was, but I think, going back to this combination of that discipline and focus, and what I've been brought up with, I'd gone to a very good private school in India. So, you know, I think what's very interesting about, and I'm sure you can relate to this, is parents, in India, and I'm sure here as well. There's an intense focus on education, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my parents at the time didn't really own a car, didn't own a house, right? But they took,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a big chunk of my probably dad's monthly salary, and sent me to the best private school in Calcutta. So it wasn't like it was probably like a mortgage payment, right?
Yeah.
But that's what they decided to invest in. They decided to
Yep.
invest in, and that was a priority for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that comes from the culture we come from.
Yes,
So
yes,
I think
yes.
that's the mindset.
Yeah,
But going back again to the relationship piece
yes,
and
yes.
building these relations, because when you come to a whole different place, like a whole
Absolutely. Yeah,
different environment,
yeah, yeah.
you are scared, you are timid, and you are not even sure of yourself. You have self-doubt at every step of the way, right? And you're like,
Absolutely.
oh my God, should I be talking to this person? How do I approach this person? How do I make a friend? How do I,
So true.
talk to my manager? How do I
Yeah,
ask for a raise? There are like
yeah,
billion things
huge,
because you have
huge.
no clue.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I'm
No
sure
clue,
it
no
takes
clue.
all the energy in just approaching a person. And I'm talking from experience
Absolutely.
as well. So, and you're talking 1977, and world was completely different, and it's just
Completely.
so much easier now because world is pretty much borderless, right? You
Yeah,
are
yeah.
connected digitally to
Yes.
everything. Sitting in
Yeah,
US, you know
yeah,
exactly what's happening,
yeah,
in say
yeah.
Japan,
And
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just so easy anywhere in the world. But that time you have zero connectivity, like zero connectivity. So
Yeah.
how did you, and people were not even aware of other cultures and other,
No, no idea.
geographies.
No
So,
idea.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
So I think it goes both ways. People here accepting you and then you
Yes.
accepting the culture or trying to fit in.
Right, right.
And I think relationships are just so important. And I get so curious when you actually told me the topic that you're passionate about is, playing the long game. And I was
Yes.
like, oh my
Yeah.
God, there's just so much substance in that and just
Right.
so much you can unveil when you say playing the long game. So what did you really mean when you say playing the long game, like in terms of relationship building?
Yeah. You see, I think the advantage I had, um, was I grew up in a culture, which I'm sure you can relate to, where my mother, my aunts, my uncles, my dad, everybody around me, the importance of relationships and investing in them, and really doing it with expecting nothing in return. right?
Mm-hmm.
You do stuff. There's a lot of so-called sacrifices you make. And sometimes you wonder, like, why are you going through so much trouble for somebody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you
Mm-hmm.
saw that all your life. You saw that all your life, and in small ways and big ways, etc., right? And you
Yeah.
saw your parents do that day in and day out, right? They were
Yes.
investing, right? And that's what I learned, right? And they weren't doing it because they'd get some benefit from helping someone out, or a cousin's son comes to town, and we used to have lots of people living with us because they went to school in town or whatever else. And my so and people that
Mm-hmm.
weren't even that close. And what I found is my parents, my mom went way out of her way to make them feel incredibly, incredibly comfortable, and incredibly, you saw that incredible unselfish behavior as you grew up, right? And what people
Mm-hmm.
don't realize, and what I think that's sort of what was in the back of my mind, as I look back and say, why is it that I was the way I was? And that's what I saw growing up. And that's what I continue to do. And I continue to do till this day, because I'll tell you, relationships are about trust. This is about trust, right? And relationships have to be a long game. So, you go there and you think someone's going to be connected to you, or just because you met them at some event or whatever else, and somehow something's going to happen. Mm-mm. You know
Mm-hmm.
what? That's very transactional.
Mm-hmm.
And people can see transactional stuff. They absolutely
Mm-hmm.
can see. And they also can see when you think, so my philosophy, just like my mom, I mean, it didn't matter whether the person was, the, are the people that are helpers cousin who came from Bihar and needed a place to live, and that way, and when that whatever, and so we're all so it didn't matter where you were, or so what I saw is this 360 degrees of trying to do the best you can with whatever you have, right? And
Yeah.
helping wherever you think you can without expecting anything in return, right? And people see through that. And I think that's what I practice all my life, is that's what I've seen. So I've sort of probably done a bunch of that. And I, so I rarely ever think, if someone approaches you, think they need something, you try and do the best you can, regardless of, if you can, you do it. If
Yeah.
it's simple, you try and, um, and I rarely ever think, and it sort of probably stems from what I saw in my parents, right? Think about, is this somehow going to help me? Am I going to somehow, whatever? That doesn't even cross my mind. If I can do something, I do it, right? If it's easy enough, someone's made a request or whatever else. And that is a long game, right? Because the being transactional is a short game, and people see through it. So, when I look back on the almost 37 years at Ernst and Young that I spent, whether it was clients, whether it was people around me, whether it was people who worked for me, whether it were people who worked with me, or the peers I worked with, 360 degrees, uh, I always tried to do the best I can and had their best interests in heart. I'm like, okay, I want to try and, for the younger folks, it's like, okay, I'm like your mother, and I wish the best for you. And so I'm gonna tell you what I think, as a well-wisher, right? So people see this well-wisher thinking as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to a transactional thinking very quickly. And you
Mm-hmm.
keep doing that, and it's like a bank, and you keep adding to the bank all your life. And someday, somewhere, something comes up, and you don't even know from where, how, and where. And I think that's sort of the so-called blessing that I've gotten over the years, and that's what sort of helped me. So even when I look back in this chapter 2.0, and the number of people who've helped me that have gone out of there, people who I knew from 20 years ago, right? I reach out to them saying, hey, I just want to let you know I'm in chapter 2.0. I'm doing this. I'm looking for this. Just wanted to, you know, so they don't have to do it. I mean, they don't even, from, many of them probably, I'm sure they remembered me, but the point is they don't have to do anything, and yet they did something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the
Mm-hmm.
questions why, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's because
Mm-hmm.
somewhere, and I had a lot of a bunch of my clients, like, okay, here's my daughter, here's my son, can you give them some counsel on whatever, they're trying to look at, and I did that all the time, right? Because
Yeah.
it's simple if you can share something with someone. So I don't know. I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset. It's been incredibly helpful to me, at least in my career journey, in my life, in my personal relationships. We have a very large circle of friends, and I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you, most of them would do anything. You ask them for anything, and they'll do anything if you ever ask them for something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And small things, big things, and so you feel very and honestly, I do the same for my friends as well, right? Um, so that's how life is.
That's cool. So you talked about building trust, right?
Yes.
In any
Mhm.
relationship. And you know, our life right now is just so busy. It's not
Yes.
possible to do this
Yes.
exercise for every person you meet or
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
everyone that is around you.
Agreed.
So are there, I mean, this is just a thought or a concept
Mhm.
that you might completely, scratch and say, no, this doesn't apply. But I'm just thinking, how do you figure out, or are there signs where you can see and say this relationship is worth investing in for long term? Or do you, or are you like, okay, there is something happening, I'm going to help and forget about it? It's like you do a good deed and you just move on, not expecting anything. But I feel like you need a lot of nurturing for a relationship to build that trust, or just be healthy, or just be around for a long time. So what are the signs? What if I
That's
wanted to build a relationship and I have 10 people and I'm like, okay, which one should I, or it's for our listeners too. How do we figure out which one is, worth investing in?
yeah. That's a great question. And I probably do the latter, which is do the best you can in the small thing that you can do,
Mm-hmm.
and then watch and see, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I'll give you an instance. So this is like at a group of people that are all had the same objectives, looking for boards, etc. And I did a fair amount in sort of helping. We were helping each other. I did a fair amount, and this, that, and I used to and every so often I'd ask someone, hey, can you help with this piece and maybe
Mm-hmm.
do that, etc. Because we were a large group, 20, 30 people, 25 or so women that were looking for the same thing. And I suspect I did a disproportionate part of the helping and going on. I hate to say if I like something, I just go out of my way if I'm passionate about something, and I'll stay up till 2, 3 a.m. to get
I
something
have seen
done. Even
that.
yeah, because I'll just do it, right?
Yeah.
And if I feel like I can do something, right? So I have no, I just do a lot. And so in that, so you start seeing patterns, right, of transactional versus this. So if I look at that, there's probably some that I'm a lot. So you watch people over 4 or 5 years, and you're doing and doing and doing, and I don't know if you Adam Grant's givers and takers, right? There are
Mm-hmm.
givers and
Mm-hmm.
takers,
Yeah.
right? So I'm pretty much a giver most of the times. However, there are times I will. I think it's a psychological thing where you sort of watch people's behavior. So, this person asked them for help and they kind of didn't even want to. In the meantime, they're looking for help all the time. So after a while, you just slow down, and I'm not very confrontational. I'm not gonna. It's not a good. So I'm not gonna visibly say anything, but I will
Mm-hmm.
slow things down if I think it's not because I don't think it's worth investing for myself. I look at it, well, this person is very transactional and feels very selfish. And so over time, I will cool down and not put that much in just because of that reason, right? So it's a very sort of subtle exit. But I will, I sort of benefit of the doubt, anyone and everybody, as much as I can, and sometimes actually it gets very overwhelming nowadays because I literally every week, every other day, I'm getting a request for, you can have a chat about something. And there are a lot of people I've known for so many years. So it's like, and I try and, do as much as I can. But so it's sort of a natural thing that happens, and you just sort of slow down in certain spheres. And
Mm,
primarily because you think, the values that you have aren't quite aligned to the values of that person. And it's not that you need something from the person. Um, the person isn't, say, generous enough, right,
got
with
it.
their time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
know.
it's like
It's very
test
intangible.
and learn, wait and watch how it
Yes,
shapes
yes,
up, right?
that's
That's the
right.
philosophy.
That's right. That's right. You're
So,
right.
and is this approach good for both personal and professional like scenarios, or do you have like different approaches for both? Or do you just apply this universally?
It's probably a little bit more, it is universal. However, in the professional setting,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there are, there are all kinds of people, shapes and sizes. Not everyone, there are some that are extremely transactional and they are there, and and so you have to be a little bit more, I guess you have to bear a little bit more in the professional setting. So even because of that, because, especially if you have to work with a colleague or a peer, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of know that your values aren't aligned with that person, and that person's, but just because it's a person who's a colleague or whatever else, you sort of do the best you can. It might not be your complete best or the most you could do, but you do just enough. um, Maybe the intensity isn't as high as maybe someone else, where you feel like you need to. So there's always in like in a professional setting, there's some people you're closer to than others for that very reason. And why do you get
Mm-hmm.
closer to certain people in a professional setting? Because you feel like your values are aligned. It doesn't feel like, there's sort of a mutual, uh, so, sort of need to invest in each other and be able, do stuff for each other,
Right, right, right,
in
right.
an unselfish way. But in a professional setting, you kind of have to be a little bit more, you do more than you probably should for that reason, because, you know, and you never want to burn any bridges, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. You never want to burn any bridges. So even if someone's not quite the way they need to be for whatever reason, you bear a lot more.
A little bit more.
It's
Be,
harder to walk away sometimes, right? Especially if you have,
yeah,
there's all kinds of people, yeah. And
yeah.
some people are a lot more like there's a lot of people at work who are very transactional, very very into that, and so you're probably less friends with them than other people.
Yeah, I agree. And I can see how, you're, I think, I always thought leadership is, you cannot have a similar approach when you are a leader towards everybody. You have to understand it's like managing a bouquet of flowers, but that bouquet of flowers is not all roses. It's like
Right?
all kinds of different flowers,
Yes,
and
yes.
you have to look at them at an individual level. So yeah, you have to have different approaches and you have to have different strategies for each. Now, if we flip the situation and say, do you have a story that you can tell us and kind of narrate how a relationship that you had invested in whatever shape or form came in handy for career progression or growing further in your job or in the country after you immigrated?
Many of them. I'll just relay one. I mean, tons of them at various times in my career, right? So I'll go through one example. And I have to, my husband Satish has a lot to do with, I think, my success, because I think what happened is, since he was in the workforce before I was, he was also an immigrant like I was, but
Mm-hmm.
he came here in 71. I came here in 77, right? So he was here 6 years before me. He went to school, etc. He had started doing, had working. So he understood the US, the culture, the
That's
work
right.
culture a lot more than I did, right? So he understood that one has to be, if you're reticent, if you're always, if you're a total introvert, and you don't have the courage to speak up or ask for stuff, you're going to be left behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and he was, I think, behind me and pushing me to do various things. So here's the story. So one, I'd made partner at EY in the New York office. I was in the New York office, and one day I come home and I say, well, I come home and say, well, we have a new partner in charge of the New York region, Jim Turley. He's come from, he was transferred from Minneapolis, and now he's in charge. So, Satish and I were talking about it, and he goes, so why would they bring a Minneapolis office partner to New York to run the new? Weren't there enough partners in the senior partners in the new? I was a pretty junior partner, just sort of made partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go, I don't know why they got Jim from Minneapolis to New York. And then he goes, well, when is Phil Laskaway retiring? Phil Laskaway was a current chairman of the firm because we have a 60-year, you have to retire at 60 as a partner. So I said, oh, I don't know, maybe in a couple of years, he's probably close to 60. Then he goes, well, they brought Jim in. He's probably a star performer. I don't know Jim from anybody, right? No one. He was
Mm-hmm.
fair. It was. They probably brought him in because he's going to be in 2 years or whenever Phil retires. Jim's probably going to be the CEO of the firm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he's telling me this a couple of years before I could even imagine, right? So I'm not into figuring out how the dominoes are moving, right? I like that. That was the least of my. I was just focused on, can I do a good job for my clients and do the best I can for them, right? Uh, so anyway, then he goes, well, I'd like you to get on Jim's calendar, Satish said, and talk to him. I said, I'm like this partner, right? What am I going to say, Jim? Here I am. I want to chat with you. Like I have nothing. It's not like we're working on a project together. I don't want to do it. So anyway, he pushed me, pushed me, pushed me. Finally, I got on Jim's calendar. Uh, and Jim is like delightful. He's a mentor of mine. In fact, about so many, literally almost every CEO of the firm, with 6 or 7 while I was there, is a mentor and a sponsor that I can count on. That's the kind of, and
Perfect.
every one of them, any one of them I could lean on even today and ask them for help, they would. Uh, I suspect that's not as common for every partner of the thousands of partners we have. So anyway, so do this, get on Jim's calendar, get to know. And he's like, oh, this is great. And everything. Oh, Sharda, we should be meeting up quarterly from now on. So literally, so because he's such a nice person, and so literally he became a mentor, sponsor, and we used to have chats about different things. He used to ask me questions, whatever. So for 2 years, I'm doing this every quarter, meeting up with Jim. Long story short, 2 years later, guess what? Jim's CEO of the firm, right?
Yes.
So now I've been meeting up with Jim, and so Jim's he got to know me. And the reason I bring this up is later on, a number of years later, there was an opportunity that we'd identified. We set up this whole thing in India, everything else, and whatever else. And this was a big, big deal for the firm. It was new. And I got picked to run this thing, become the CEO in India to start this thing, a startup within the firm, which is a big deal. We have 75,000 people there. I think it's become huge over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, we were talking about this idea and stuff. And so Jim goes, I need you to move to India to get this set up. I was like, Jim, I've just been serving clients. I've never set up any businesses in India. I've never worked in India before. Well, this is going to be an opportunity of a lifetime for you. This is about building a business. So he saw what I never could see, right? And in retrospect, that was a milestone in my career in terms of one of the things that really helped me grow as a leader, as a person, as everything, right? And gave me incredible experience. So he pushed me into it, right? And I wasn't ready to move back to India to do this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I do. But he pushed me. So it's that interaction and that longer sense of investing. I mean, even till today, Jim's long retired, obviously. In touch with him and every other CEO that came before and after. So that's sort of the So it's also getting the courage and having a mentor slash guide in your life. Because, there's lots of points of time where you don't have the courage to do so many things you should be doing,
Mm-hmm.
always, right? None of us, at least, you brought this up, you hesitate, you don't, uh, you don't ask for raises, you don't do this,
Mm-hmm.
you don't ask for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So having someone that gives you that courage and that thing and is huge. And I think the other thing that I think about that has helped, I'm sure you and a lot of others who've been extremely successful, is the fact that, uh, as a child and as, after marriage, I've had incredible, everyone around my dad, my mom, like no boundaries. You can do anything you want to.
Yeah.
It's so the incredible confidence that it builds in you when people are confident about your ability.
Mm-hmm.
And so this confidence that you have growing up as a kid and growing up, and then, we've been married 48 years, is a force multiplier when you have an ecosystem around you that sometimes helps you imagine what you can't imagine, right? And
Totally.
yeah, and so that that in my, I mean, I feel incredibly lucky because I'm not sure everyone has that
That's
automatically.
it.
It's not an automatic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having that system around you, whether it's your friends, whether it's your, obviously husband, my mom, my father's passed away, but every time it was like, oh yeah, you can do it. This is like, you can do it. You can do anything you want. So I sincerely, even till this day, believe that I can do anything that I set my mind up to do. And if you notice something about my career, which is very unusual for a public accounting partner, you rarely will ever find it, actually, is I started off as in the audit practice, and then after a while moved to the tax practice.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, set up this startup within India, which has grown hugely from scratch. Then moved to the private equity practice, which is M&A and transactions, and did a bunch of that. Then the last 5 years of my tenure at EY was in the consulting practice, digital transformation, robotic process automation, etc. And that transition, and this is like literally, it's like a different com- company within a company. That
Mm-hmm.
transition requires relationships. It's like changing 4 jobs, 5 jobs within a firm, right?
Yeah.
And every time you start from scratch, and every time you have to build and rebuild trust, rebuild that, everything else, relationships. And that is very hard. I mean, that's not an easy task because you're comfortable, you usually goes audit, tax, whatever, consulting, M&A, whatever else you do, right? People stay in their lanes within their field all their life, pretty much, especially if they've had a long tenure, right? But I didn't have that. And that in itself also, I think, is a testimony for the fact that, our, I think, immigrant resilience, as I call it, our
Yeah.
empathy and wanting to learn and listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you know very little, you have no choice but to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I started off with literally zero in terms of knowledge of the culture, people, etc. So you're incredibly intellectually curious. You had to, because otherwise you obviously wouldn't survive. Or you'd be in the dark ages. So I think that whole system, and I've gone to the point where I literally have no fear of change, zero. You know, put me in something that I have no idea about. Maybe, I'll have enough people around me who are going to help me, and we'll help each other, and we'll get it done, right? No fear. And that's why I mean, I'm not a technologist, but for the last 5 years at Ernst Young, I started the intelligent automation, robotic process automation practice at EY. Now, this is like a 55-year-old
Mm-hmm.
that's that's sort of that you don't really expect, that doesn't have a tech background, that has gotten to know enough, that is connecting the dots, that's showing how you can have business-led applications run by, whatever. So lots of that. So I think this whole journey, as I look back, has been a function of lots of different points and things around your life that have contributed to things.
Yeah. I
Always tear
think,
up.
yeah, there's just so much packed into this little tiny story and whatever you followed with. Um, I have so many takeaways, and I can relate to probably 99% of that.
Yeah.
One is And I have a lot of questions, like follow-up questions, you being,
Mm-hmm.
so senior and, been there, done that. One thing is that, hey, investing in these relationships. Then the second thing was, I think the big thing is like being risk averse. Like,
Yes.
you said you have
Yes.
zero fear.
Yeah.
What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
You're going
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
fail, and so
Yes.
be it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I think
Yes.
that's so important. Like, and that comes only when people around you give you that
Yes.
confidence that it's okay to fail.
Yes.
And if you
Exactly.
fail, you're actually going to
Exactly.
learn. And I think
Right.
that is the best way to learn. I mean, we
Yes.
need to fail to actually,
Absolutely.
see
Absolutely.
the black from white, or light
Absolutely.
from dark, or, uh,
Absolutely.
you know, uh, heat from cold. You have to have the
Abs
context, right? Otherwise, we
Absolutely.
would never know how the other side is. And if you miss the other side, you will never cherish and enjoy this side. So I think there is just so much that, the different ingredients
Yeah.
that have to be there from the very beginning, where you're born, your environment, your parents, who supports you, who is in it with you, in the journey. And I'm going back to the story, that you narrated, that your husband said, hey, get on, Jim's
Jim's
calendar.
calendar.
If he had not been
Yeah.
supportive, and if wasn't a
Mm,
relationship that was like thoughtful enough, you'd be
mm,
like, okay, whatever is happening, I have enough of my stuff. And I know
right. Right.
people
Right.
do that all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then the investment that he made into, you guys'
Yeah. Yeah.
relationship, and
Yes.
pushed you. Now, one question I have is, and a lot of people have this question, I
Right.
get asked this question all the time.
Right.
When you say you find a leader in a company and you say, oh, I love this leader and this is the
Right.
leader I look up to, and
Yes.
you want to have a conversation, and you
Right.
might not have the
Correct.
best topic on this planet to talk about, right?
Right. Right.
You're like,
Right.
dude, what do I talk about, right? How do I kind of impress this person? How do I build a relationship? And this is like a real dilemma that a lot of us have. I had it when I was, when I was like growing in my career, maybe, 15 years ago. I was like, oh, I wish I could get 5 minutes. I wish I could bump into this leader
Yes.
in the
Yes.
cafeteria or in the hallway. How do you basically some strategies that could help like aspiring leaders
Yes.
to get into the good books, or get into that realm where they get noticed, or they could approach a leader? And
Yes.
then I
Yes.
have a follow-up question to that as
Yes.
well.
Yes. Yeah. I think the overall thing is persistence. You're not going to make it every time. You're not going to get it
Mm-hmm.
every time. But
Uh-huh.
it's a game of persistence. But I'll give you one example. When I was in India, right? So I was brand new in India. There were these luminary leaders, like obviously Nandan Nilekani, and they were all there, and like Azim Premji and all of these
Oh
guys,
yeah.
and you had all these guys, right? So here, and I'm like, these guys are so inspiring, right? I don't know them, they don't know me, right? And I'm like, I would love for them to come and speak to my kids, as I call them, that I'd hired, and we want to get all inspired. We love to this thing, and none of them, these are like inspiring figures, right? So here's what I did. And it ended up, Nandan came and spoke to us. Azim Premji came into, all of these guys showed up. So yeah, I tried something like so with Mr. Premji. Here's what I did is, one day we were in the Wipro campus looking at a bunch of different things, and someone was touring, something was going on. And I didn't meet him at that time. So I read this quote on the Wipro campus. It was broad somewhere on some hallway somewhere that I'm walking around saying, um, integrity, uh, quality like integrity. What's the thing? It's gonna come back. Quality. uh, it's like cannot be compromised. It wasn't that it's going to come back to me. Uh, it's like you
Quality
don't
like
have
integrity cannot be
agree,
compromised. Something like that.
something like that, right? It was a little bit more nicely said, right? So I'm looking and saying, this is so true. You can't. It's like integrity. You cannot compromise your integrity. You cannot compromise quality. So this
Okay.
quote is there, and they said Azim Premji. Just say Azim Premji was his line. So I'm like, this is so, I mean, it was in my mind. So I go back, I send him an email. I got his email and said, Mr. Premji, this is this. I was in your campus. So I met up with so and so people. I was there. Here's what I do. I saw this quote of yours, and this is so profound. This is so thoughtful. This is so incredible. And I have all these kids. There's a few hundred kids that would love to hear you speak. They've never heard you. You're like, you're
That's
like, they're saying,
awesome.
can you please come and speak to us? He replied right away, and he came and he spoke. Um, and then happened to be sort of a neighbor on our street, got to know him. And even till this day, I send him a note literally in 10 minutes. I get a response back, literally 10 minutes. I mean, I don't know. I think the guy works 24/7. Um, so, and it was like bold. So it's like you have to do something bold and something unique. Oh, I'll give you another technique that can be used. I don't know. I must have used it from time to time. So you hear an inspiring person speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere, whoever it is,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's a town hall or whatever else. Something that they say catches your attention, and they don't know you from Adam. You should try and get hold of them, find their email. It's like very easy. And send this, you were this thing, I watched you on this, you said this, and it spoke to my heart. It's really this. Tell them something about yourself that might stand out. I'd love to
Mm-hmm.
have whatever. Uh Catch up, a quick whatever. I'd love to talk to you, right? When you get a
Yeah.
chance, or stop by. I think the world of you for that reason. Or even a lot of times, what happens is the younger folks, when they join a firm, whatever, there's all these older partners, some of them inspire, whatever else. They're very scared to even go and talk to them a lot. I mean, maybe the younger generation's different. Mine, I was certainly not in that thing. I don't know if, but you absolutely can do a little, hey, I'm this, I just joined this. I'm so happy to be at Ernst Young. Would love to catch up over a quick coffee or stop by your office whenever you have time, right?
Yeah.
That little pop-in stuff, and you can catch someone in the hallway or something saying, I'm so and so, I'd love to do that. Most people will not say no. Most
Mm-hmm.
people will not say no. And even if half of them say no, what's the difference, right? It doesn't matter. So the point is, you have to figure out ways to do stuff that's a little, I'm going to say, a little different than the ordinary. There's a lot of ordinary around. Do something that's a little extraordinary and try and do something. I think every day that where you're doing something a little different than you would normally do, and think about it. And I just feel even till this, I mean, I'm not a tech person. I'm just so incredibly fascinated with what's going on with Gen AI and stuff. I'm mentoring this company for the last 4 years, and I'm so proud to say that uh, they've been selected by Microsoft to be to be the top 100 Gen AI firms out of 25,000
Awesome.
startups. 25,000 startups they looked at. So there's all kind, and I'm mentoring them more from trying to learn from them, understand that little, I don't understand some of the basics, teach me. And they're incredibly wonderful with that. And I give back in different ways to help them. But so it's this thing about do something different than staying in your lane all the time. Because if you're in your lane all the time, everyone's in their lane all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that.
Um,
That's so true. I think about it and I'm like, yeah, that's
yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
Now that takes me to the point where I'm like, sometimes you keep on giving, givers and takers.
Because, yeah.
You keep on giving, 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 and the other side. And this is more from a mentoring now that we are talking about
Yes.
mentoring, and you never kind of see reciprocation. Question I had was, how you keep on investing in relationships, you keep on reaching out, you keep on like asking stuff, bring up these interesting topics, you're just giving, 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 and there is no reciprocation, there is just no investing happening from the other side. At
Yes.
what point do you kind of pull back and say, you know what, let me move on, this is not going to work, I need to find a different sponsor, different mentor, different
Yes.
guide
Yes. Yes.
altogether?
Yes, yes. I
is
mean,
is
that
there
happens. Yeah,
a
happens fairly often, right?
often? Yeah.
Yeah, it does. And so, you have to use judgment, say, you know what, and then you have to find an elegant way because at the end of the day, you don't want to cut off anything in a way that hurts anybody, right? Because it's not worth it. Life's too short to be, there's other things to do in life, right? So, yeah, there comes a point where you feel that this is a very one-sided relationship, and it's not. So you just cool down. You don't invest as much. You cut down your investments. You say you're busy, you know, that kind of stuff. That's it. But you have to, because you're right. First of all, you can't, you know,
Yeah.
full-time job, but more importantly, you have to find. So that's if you get that feeling, because it's really a lack of mutual alignment of values, right?
Mm,
And if
mm,
there isn't a mutual alignment of values
mm-hmm.
where you don't feel, and plus you don't ever, I mean, no one wants to get used.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. I agree.
generally, and so you should just find ways to just cool things.
Yeah. I mean, if I go back to my experiences, I always feel, when you are in a conversation and when you get out of the conversation and you feel uh, kind of happy, you feel you were engaged and
Yeah,
you got
yeah,
takeaways and you have to-dos, or you learned something or you taught something. I think that feels like a great balanced kind of
yes,
relationship you're building
yeah.
versus you get out of a meeting or a session and you're like, what the hell did I do for last 30 minutes? Like, there's like nothing. There is like no follow-up to that. And that's where I personally feel like, you know what, this is not worth it. This is not worth my time, basically, because you have so much going on and everybody's life is extremely busy. So you can only invest in just so much, right? That actually brings me back to what you said early on, that you have so many friends, right?
Yes,
And you have,
yes.
I'm sure you have a lot of professional contacts. How do you how do you keep in touch with everybody? Or it might not be on a daily basis. It might not be like, hey, pick up the phone
Yeah,
like
yeah,
all days and
yeah.
like, hello. What strategies do you use? How do you kind of manage this big pool of people that is your support system?
Yeah, so over time, different groups, you spend more time on than other groups. But there's a few things that I've done actually over the last probably 30 to 30 years at least. And here's what I do. And it takes a little bit of time, but I do it religiously. Is I'll send a shortened Mother's Day note I create. I spend time. I don't, did you get my Mother's Day note this year? I
Yeah,
don't know
dude.
if I.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and every time I get to know someone who's a mother or whatever, so that thing probably has maybe 3,000 people. I mean, a lot of mothers that I've gotten to know over the years. I'll send a Mother's Day note out. I'll send an International Women's Day note out,
Hmm.
to women that have been friends, this thing. Sometimes 20 years ago, whatever else. Um, I'll send a Father's Day note out. So I'm sort of thinking about what I'm going to write for my Father's Day note this year. I will send a Thanksgiving note. Memorial Day, this time I was sort of slow. I said, I'm not going to do a Memorial Day. I just got a little whatever. Um, and I'll around the holidays I'll send one, sometimes Thanksgiving. So I'm usually there's probably 3 or 4 touch points during the year for a group of, I'd say probably 6 to 10,000 people. Different groups and different people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've done this for 30 years, 30,
Wow.
right? And it doesn't matter, sometimes, but what it does is that person, let's say is John Doe, who's been getting this. I don't even expect anything. I don't expect a note back. But that John will probably remember me and my name. If nothing else, if they've forgotten what my name was, they might even remember me 25 years hence, right? And there's
Yeah.
a recall, right? So there's a large group of people that probably know me. And honestly, on some of them, I might not even remember where I met this person, right? Because I haven't really
Mm-hmm.
been in touch. Might have met them on a plane ride someplace and we got to talking and I felt like this is the thing. So, if I have their email address, I'll put it on, if I remember to do it. It's not a perfect thing. I'm sure I forget stuff. But that, to me, it's a very small, yeah, it takes a few hours of investment, those 4 or 5 times a year, and I do that. That's sort of one of my habits. The other thing I do a lot is I have a system where I'm tracking the it's an app I use where I forget 2, 3 thousand relationships in there that are various profiles or sort of in the news sort of thing that I know. So anytime they're in the news for whatever, 50% of the time, if it's worthy, I will send them a personal note. Hey, Neil, I just saw this. You just joined this board. Congratulations, etc. Because a lot of times I get advance notice through this little news. Because otherwise, I'm not reading every single newspaper to figure out what happened with people, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And these people are usually, maybe the more profile people that are in the news, and so I'll find out stuff about them and I just take one line, congrats, right? Oh, great seeing this, and I'll cut and paste, and it takes probably 2, 3 minutes to send that thing out. So I do that. I do that reading every day. I mean, it's usually 5 or 6 people that I know are in the news, but I'm not going to, I usually don't send more than 2 or 3 a month out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just regular stuff. So I do that regularly. It's like brushing my teeth. I do that all the, I that's my thing as well. Because it's nice to have people that have done something important happen in their life, because they won an award or something happened. But sometimes you don't find out about everything. So I do those two things. But also, you know, uh, that's about, I think those are the ones that are the regulars. I'm sure there's other many things I do to stay in touch. Um, but it gets tougher and tougher over time because you have just a large circle.
Yeah. I'm sure, like
Mm.
with so many people in your circle, I think it's
Yeah.
definitely harder.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
you mentioned you have an app that kind of
Yes, yes,
keeps
yes.
you
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
informed about who is in the
yeah,
news.
yeah.
But that just brought me um like back to the digital era we live in versus
Right, right,
like pre-digital, where
right.
you had no idea what's happening in anybody's life. Do you see yourself leaning more towards digital, or do you see yourself more towards like I need to have it everything like in a diary written down? And do
Yeah,
you see, uh, at least I definitely see it has kind of blurred the lines between where anyone is on this planet. It does not matter. You are kind of involved in everybody's life who means something to you professionally and personally. It doesn't matter where they are living. But do you see the change? And do you see any pros and cons to before and after
before and after, you mean the
digital?
digital era? I am a huge digital optimist. In general, I'm an optimist. I have a hard time seeing bad in anything. It's just like I always find it's like opportunity and stuff that I look for stuff like that, right? So I'm a huge digital optimist. I think this can change. I mean, first of all, make you a lot more efficient, a lot more
Hmm.
efficient. It can, I mean, I use uh, Copilot and ChatGPT all the time to help me with writing, for sure. Help me with thinking. If I'm thinking about a question that so these are some of the things I'm thinking of. What else can I be thinking of? Do that all the time. So it's sort of my sounding board, mentor, coach. I've started using it as a coach, sounding board. So I use that all the time because Tara
Nice.
has so much more knowledge than I do. So I am a big believer in it can be harnessed for extreme good, extreme efficiency, extreme lots of stuff, right? I mean, there's always bad. People walk around with guns and they can go around shooting people, right? Whatever. So there's always bad characters around, but you can't help them. There's very little you can, whatever. There's other people figuring that stuff out. I'm just trying to figure out is how can I leverage this new digital era to be a lot more effective and
Hmm.
efficient. And I think there's lots to do. And again, I have no fear. I have no fear. Even if I don't know something that's whatever technical or whatever else, I'll fiddle around with it. I'll either figure it out. If not, I'll call some of the younger generation, the 20-year-olds or the 18-year-olds, and say, I
Yeah,
can't figure this out. Can you help me? I was trying to do this. How do I do this? And I do that a lot because, like, these kids know so much more than I do. So and I like to hang around them because they kind of can teach me so many things that I won't be able to learn on my own otherwise. So I just look at this as, I mean, I do make my notes and stuff on uh, paper. To me, to be more visible, I'm like, oh, these are 4 things I have to do today. I write them down because, like, okay, it's to make it to go front of mind because otherwise they can slip in the day. So I do use some amount of paper, but a lot of the stuff that I do is
it's
on
true.
yeah, is all digital. It's all digital.
Yeah,
Pretty good with. I mean, I love math and stuff. I was always a math person, although I didn't sort of not a math scientist type, but I love that. I can figure that out pretty quickly.
that's awesome. Yeah, you do sound like a early adopter of technology. Any
Oh,
new app, I
oh,
think we should send it to you first.
yeah, no, I just love it, right? Like even like the Equat app we were involved in, right?
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
people like fearful. I'm like, this can be used for so many
So
things,
many
but
things I remember.
change management is so hard. 90% of the people just won't do it, right? They don't see. I'm like, when I was talking to Sanjay and others, I'm like, this is great. This is crazy. This is going to do this. This is going to do this. This is going to do
Yeah,
this. And so you start imagining what's possible, but sometimes you're ahead of your skis and not everything can get done.
agree.
But
Ahead of time.
yeah, but you know what? To me, imagination is the best thing you can do. Is imagine what's possible and continually try and upgrade your memory and skills the best you can. Your computers get upgraded all the time. What about human beings?
Yeah, definitely. We did talk about like what could aspiring leaders do to build relationships, right? And how do they build a strong relationship? The whole idea of just putting yourself out there, trying multiple times, be persistent, and one day it'll click. But do you have do you have any insights on the mistakes that aspiring leaders should avoid while trying to build a relationship? Any mistakes you can think of that you made or saw
Um,
somebody else make who was approaching you and like, nope, no, that shouldn't happen.
yeah, there's tons of mistakes I made, but I'll go to the positive because if you do the negative, I think that's a mistake. I think empowering the people around you to do stuff,
Hmm.
and whoever it is, right? It's very important. As a leader, one of your main goals is to help others succeed and do the best you can, right? So empowering others and asking them and giving them more. One of my admins actually was in India, right? Smart woman. Anyway, she got to do so much more than an admin would do. Now she's running a whole unit
Hmm.
in the whole thing, which is a huge unit, right? Because she's like essentially become a senior manager, right? So, and she started off sort of as essentially a secretary, right? So I think as a leader, empowering people is very important. The other thing that I think, and sometimes it's cultural, and we just don't even realize we're doing this
Yeah.
unconsciously, is it's always good. We need to celebrate others around us a lot more than we do,
Hmm.
right? Celebrate the small successes continuously, etc. Because I'll tell you, it builds an incredible amount of energy and connections, right? Someone around you does something that's, might not even have been potentially noticed, but it makes an impact. And celebrating that and circulating that to a bunch of people around it creates energy for that person and really inspires that person to get to the next level. So to me, I think as a leader, your biggest role has to be to inspire people to do their best and help them succeed. And in the process, you get inspired. I think there's a lot of stuff that you get when you get people around you. Because I'll tell you, I think the biggest issue is we don't is unused real potential. right? We all have a lot more potential than gets asked of each one of us every day of
Mm-hmm.
our lives, right? We can
Mm-hmm.
do a lot more. And we've been asked to do this, but you know what? We can do that, right? And that's the biggest, I'm going to use the word crime that gets committed, is you get people to do stuff. And that's why I think technology and being digital is so much more. You know, so much stuff that we is mundane we should not be doing, right? Why
Mm-hmm.
don't you get human beings to be what they're really capable of and be, and that's honestly why we started, I had pushed on the back in 2015, pushed on the RPA journey, said this stuff we need bots upload stuff, we need bots doing that, we don't be sitting doing this. I've been doing this
Uh-huh.
for 15, people have been doing this for 15 years, why should we be doing this? So I think the biggest thing that we can do is get people to reach their real potential
Potential.
by inspiring them because they can do so much more than we expect of them and expect I probably expect a lot. I expect too much. I don't expect a lot of myself every day, but I try to expect a lot of people. But that's a sign of, I think that's a sign of, I want you to do well. You can do so much more than you're doing.
Sure, yeah, I 100% agree. You always have to, um, you have unlimited potential as a human being. But I think we as leaders have to be very aware of, hey, the other person has to be comfortable doing what we are putting them into. There should be no burnout. They should
Yes,
enjoy
yes,
learning.
yes,
I mean, all
yes,
those things. But
yes,
I think the biggest part is, sometimes you said the values or the principles or um, the understanding of the world that we carry, not everybody has the same thing. So brings
yes.
me to inclusivity and equitable world. How do we celebrate diversity and be more inclusive? Any tips for leaders to make sure that, hey, they are inclusive in their approach of building a network, or even when they are working with their teams, what could they do to ensure that they are considering the diverse perspectives and backgrounds in their team and yours as well? Do you have
Right.
any insights on that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to think about is you can't be going to the usual suspects every time. You know, if you are around the same people all the time, every time,
Hmm.
or honestly, there's going to be a limitation on the learning, right? So bringing new blood in, bringing people who aren't the mold that you might be of.
Hmm.
And honestly, I really think, and I'm actually, I actually enjoy people who can push back, who push back,
Yeah.
especially when youngsters do young and push back and sometimes have to gain the courage or whatever else to say, no, this
No.
doesn't make sense to me. This does, right?
Yeah.
To me, that's a sign of great, that's a sign of a person who's terrific, right? So not having a bunch of yes men or women around you, having going out to not go to the usual suspects, which most of us do because we're comfortable with our own kind.
Hmm.
And that's the biggest, when you start getting very comfortable, overly comfortable every day, that's when I think the decline starts. You
Starts.
really have to learn to be uncomfortable on a regular basis, uncomfortable with your surroundings because you haven't seen them before. That means you need to adapt, or uncomfortable with something that you're hearing that you've never learned, so it pushes you to learn, or uncomfortable with, oh, I never heard that before. I didn't know even that existed. And you have to be sort of trying, because at the end of the day, this game is about learning and growing for everyone around you, right? And how do you
Yes.
learn and grow if you have 10 people and you've seen the same 10 people for the last 5 years, 10 years, and that's all you've seen, and you are in this bubble? Well, that's a limitation by itself, right?
Definitely.
So it's critical. I mean, everyone talks about it. There's been studies, and innovation doesn't happen with the same people around the block sitting around and talking. So And diversity, you see, and I think what's also critical is you can have a diverse team around you, but the word you use was inclusivity, right? You have to include them. You have to make them feel like they belong, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to empower them. You have to make them feel welcome and comfortable. And that is a huge thing, right? Because you could be sitting in a room and you can have people of all shapes and sizes and all kinds of things. But if you can't, as a leader, make the person who might be the most uncomfortable around you or around the table, make that person feel comfortable, like you are connected to them. And some
Yeah.
of it's, I mean, a bunch of it's EQ. It's EQ. And some people have a little bit more of that, or have developed more of that, and some people just have not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I think the sign of a great leader is a person who can make the person who probably is the most uncomfortable in their surroundings in the room more comfortable than that person otherwise would be, and include them in that way. Because otherwise, and give them a voice, and give them a
Yeah.
voice. It's so important to give everybody a voice, and they won't do it if they just show up because it's the United Nations but don't really have a voice.
Yeah. I so agree. And I feel if there is anything that a leader should learn is be inclusive
Yeah,
and, nurture your people. It might not be a lot from a leader's perspective, like the investment standpoint, or even time or even effort, but to the other person,
it's huge.
it's like make or break it situation. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah,
10-minute conversation with
yeah,
a great leader who can just change your perspective, it somehow fuels your passion. It fuels
absolutely.
your whole you know, your whole life. You
Yeah,
want to do so much more. And as you said, we have unlimited potential, and you just have to unlock it somehow. And
yeah.
these conversations and these interactions can definitely unlock it.
Mhm.
This has been amazing, and I just love this, mix of professional, personal, stories and whatnot. Like so many takeaways. I think this was a great summary of a 37-year-old career at one of the biggest companies we have in this world. So thank you so much, Sharda. It was
Th-
fabulous talking to you.
Well, thank you so much, Neetu, for inviting me and having the conversation. Really lovely, lovely. It's such
Absolutely.
I
It-
I've enjoyed the warmth of the conversation, the questions you asked, got me to think think about stuff that I wasn't thinking about all the time, but it was in the back of my mind. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful day, and all the
Thank you
best.
again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again,
Take
Sharda.
care. Take care.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to the Inclusive Insights podcast. Remember, building and investing in relationships is a long term commitment that pays dividends in many ways. Until next time, stay inclusive and keep striving for excellence.